Government motion. The Chief Secretary for Administration will move the motion on support and rebuilding work after the fire at Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po. Members have been informed that I have accepted the Chief Secretary's suggestion to extend the duration of this motion debate so that members who wish to speak may have a chance to do so. Each member may speak once for up to 5 minutes. Members who wish to speak, please press the Request to Speak button. I now call upon the Chief Secretary for Administration to speak and move the motion. Chief Secretary for Administration. I move that the motion as printed on the agenda be passed. President, the Council fully supports the government's disaster relief and rebuilding work. The Wang Fuk Court fire caused numerous casualties and extensive property damage. The government is deeply saddened by the tragedy. In the face of this merciless blaze, the government has done everything possible to provide medical treatment for the injured, offer aftercare support, facilitate social recovery, conduct an investigation, and reform relevant systems. To this end, the Chief Executive immediately established three task forces after the fire, namely the Task Force on Investigation and Regulation, Task Force on Emergency Support and Fundraising, and Task Force on Emergency Accommodation, to actively follow up on all matters related to the fire. An independent committee was also set up to examine the cause of the incident and related issues, find out what actually happened, and make recommendations to prevent similar occurrences and improve procedures. As the Chief Executive mentioned earlier, the government will work closely with the LegCo to take forward institutional reforms, scrutinize funding allocations, and enact legislation leading society forward. This is why at the very beginning of the 8th LegCo term, the government proposed a mission to discuss with LegCo members how best to support victims and rebuild their lives, as well as to reform the existing systems. Regarding investigation and regulation, the Task Force on Investigation and Regulation chaired by me has been working tirelessly to advance the relevant work in line with the Chief Executive's instructions. After the fire, the government swiftly established a cross-departmental investigation team to investigate the cause of the fire, the factors that led to its spread, and the reasons for the large number of casualties. The police and the ICAC also established a joint investigation team to look into the incident and have since arrested certain individuals. Regarding regulation, in response to the Wang Fuk Court fire, the Fire Services Department immediately implemented a series of measures to step up inspections to ensure the effective operation of fire services, installations, and equipment in buildings, including establishing a dedicated team for targeted inspections, setting up a quick response unit to be swiftly deployed to check the functioning of fire safety systems while attending to fires in buildings, and optimizing relevant arrangements by punishing any violations and taking enforcement action. We are also optimizing the deployment mechanisms to automatically dispatch additional rescue vehicles to fires involving large scaffolding. Additionally, the Buildings Department launched a special operation at the end of November to inspect existing buildings and submit samples of scaffold nets for testing. The Development Bureau also announced earlier that buildings undergoing major maintenance must immediately have scaffold nets removed. External wall works should also be halted as per the instruction. In mid-December, a new on-site sampling and inspection regime for scaffold nets was announced. The task force is actively coordinating relevant policy bureaus and departments to give their full support and cooperation to the independent committee. The government is determined to carry out a comprehensive systemic reform of the regulatory framework to break down barriers of vested interest. Later, the relevant secretaries and I will elaborate on work in this regard. The Task Force on Emergency Support and Fundraising, chaired by the Deputy Chief Secretary, coordinates bureaus and departments to provide swift and specific assistance to those affected, addressing their immediate living needs and helping them rebuild their lives. As at noon on 8th of January, the support fund for Wang Fuk Court and Tai Po established by the government had amassed approximately $4.3 billion and had launched 11 assistance programs providing emergency financial support to different groups affected by the fire. The total commitment for the programs is approximately $1.2 billion. Later, the Deputy Chief Secretary and relevant secretaries will elaborate further on the work. In relation to short and medium-term accommodation arrangements, the Task Force on Emergency Accommodation chaired by the Deputy Financial Secretary swiftly coordinated the relevant policy bureaus and departments to provide accommodation for the affected residents after the fire. As of 13th of January, a total of 200-odd residents were still staying in hotel rooms provided with coordination of the Home and Youth Affairs Bureau, 500-odd in youth hostels and camps, and 3,639 in transitional housing units and flats of the Housing Society and Housing Authority. There are currently still 1,000-odd units available for the longer-term accommodation of affected residents. We consider the supply adequate. The task force is actively exploring long-term rehousing options as well, taking different factors into consideration, compassionate, practical, and legal. While we will cater for residents' individual circumstances and wishes, we need to make sure resources and public funds are used efficiently. Later, the Deputy Financial Secretary and relevant secretaries will elaborate on relevant work. The Wang Fuk Court fire was deeply tragic and distressing, but we must learn from it and turn our grief into strength. I hope members will support this motion and offer their valuable views on the regulatory support and rebuilding work after the Tai Po fire. The two deputy secretaries and I will provide a consolidated response after hearing the speeches of members. President, I so submit and implore members to support this government motion.
I now propose the question to you that the Chief Secretary for Administration's motion be passed. Next, I will first call upon the Deputy Chief Secretary for Administration and the Deputy Financial Secretary to speak in their respective capacities as heads of the three task forces. Then, 5 public officers will speak. After they have spoken, I will invite members to speak. Chief Secretary for Administration.
President, in my opening remarks, I talked about the salient points of the work of the three task forces set up after the fire. While we want to provide disaster relief and help people rebuild their lives, we really need to learn from the experience, turn grief into strength. We need to drive reforms of existing systems to build a safer Hong Kong so that citizens can live in safety and prevent recurrence of relevant tragedy. As the chief executive said, the government has plans to launch different reforms and improvement measures. As the chairman of the Task Force on Investigation and Regulation, I will talk about some suggestions made by the government to drive institutional reforms. First, to enhance fire safety resilience. We have a working group set up by the Security Bureau that has already convened 7 meetings, and a series of reform measures have been proposed, including legislative reforms to enhance the regulatory powers of the Fire Services Department and, for example, a new requirement that requires approval of the Fire Services Department to turn off fire services installations, and that would enhance the gatekeeper role of Fire Services Department. This will plug an existing loophole. If temporary suspension of operations of fire services installations is required for works, approval would have to be obtained from the Fire Services Department in future. Right now, the fire safety legislation mainly takes enforcement action against owners and registered contractors of fire services installations, but not property management companies. We plan to include the responsibilities of property management companies, and then Fire Service Department will become a statutory gatekeeper of fire safety in the institution. We also plan to, through the legislative reforms, upgrade some administrative measures to become statutory requirements, so that for some fire safety offenses, for example, not conducting annual checks for fire services installations and equipment, blocking the means of escape, or provide additional measures when fire services installations are not working, there will be a fixed penalty in future to promote the in-time or on-time rectification of relevant issues. We will also greatly increase the penalties for registered contractors for false certificates. We will increase the fines as well as potentially including an imprisonment term. The Fire Services Department will also make good use of innovation and technology to enhance rescue and fire resilience capabilities to increase efficiency in rescue and firefighting. Second, we will enhance enforcement and regulation of building maintenance. We plan to have the following institutional reforms. First of all, we will review the buildings ordinance and propose more legislative reforms, including putting in or enhancing the regulatory framework for large-scale building maintenance. We will review the offenses relating to the building maintenance works and regulatory procedures. We will also review the regulation and inspection mechanism of construction materials. The Development Bureau right now takes a risk-based approach and they will review existing regulatory requirements to see if there's any room for improvement. The Development Bureau will also work with the Construction Industry Council, and the Council will make recommendations on the list of materials, especially for scaffold nets to be used. Thirdly, regarding scaffolding for large-scale building maintenance, we will later on promulgate standards for safe distance, and these will be incorporated into the laws. The Buildings Department will have a mechanism to coordinate external wall repairs works, major building works of different buildings. We will also have some improvement measures for construction site safety. The government will amend relevant legislation for contractors, subcontractors, and construction site personnel. We will have clear statutory duties, and we will make sure there is no smoking in construction sites to lower the risk of having fire caused by smoking in construction sites. We will submit relevant amendment proposals in a few weeks to the LegCo. The government will also amend Code of Practice relating to scaffolding. We will have a material requirement in relation to toe-tip boards to minimize risk of fire. We will also enhance the role of the Urban Renewal Authority in promoting building maintenance. To combat rigging, we will enhance URA's role and functions in this regard. The concrete measures are: we will enhance the functions of smart tender. We will also have a stringent pre-approved list for consultants and contractors to provide tendering assistance to owners corporations, and only those on the pre-approved list can participate in tendering, and people must sign up on the smart tender platform. The URA will conduct tendering for owners and will decide on the winning contractor and consultant. if one applies for government maintenance subsidy, the URA can help owners conduct tendering, and then the URA will make recommendations on which consultant or which contractor to choose. For buildings applying for government maintenance subsidy, the URA will conduct random inspections during works are being undertaken to take a dynamic approach in supervision, and consultants and contractors will be requested to, at milestones of works projects, to make a report to the URA, for example, when the scope of works has changed or when there is a variation of costs. The URA will also conduct a satisfaction survey in relation to the performance of the consultants and contractors with owners, and this will determine whether the consultants and contractors stay on the pre-approved list. To enhance smart tenders functions, owners applying for government maintenance subsidies can directly appoint the consultant and contractor recommended or decided by the URA, and we can also have some exemptions with restrictions relaxed under HYAB, Home and Youth Affairs Bureau's requirements. For variation of order that may significantly inflate the costs of works projects, we will require owners' corporations when resolving on the relevant items at OC meetings. There will be different voting in person thresholds for different levels of fees. And this, we believe, will enhance participation of owners in works and maintenance projects. We will also enhance the proxy instrument regime to make sure the proxy instruments are indeed signed by owners. Institutional reform can only be undertaken with concerted efforts and with a common goal. The government later on will consult stakeholders and the electrical on the relevant proposals. We hope that the members will raise your valuable views today. I so submit.
Deputy Chief Secretary for Administration. Madam President, the Wang Fuk Court fire came as a major shock that caused significant concern and led to an outpouring of compassion across the community. On the day of the fire, the Chief Executive deployed and planned the relief, recovery, and investigation, and then on the following day he announced the establishment of 3 task forces. One of them was chaired by me, and that is the Task Force for Investigation and then a support fund was also set up to give maximum support to the 5 victims and also to leverage the community's resources. That support fund is to offer support to residents as well as in ways such as medium to long-term housing and also the other forms of support needed because of the fire or related to the fire. The government led by example by offering $300 million as startup capital. As at the 13th of January this year, the fund has raised $4.3 billion in total and launched 11 emergency assistance programs, providing financial support for various groups hit by the fire. The total commitment for these schemes amounts to $1.2 billion. All sums from the support fund will go into assisting residents in coping with hardship as a result of losing their homes, providing emergency and medium to long-term support to help them return to a normal life and rebuild their homes. Relevant policy bureaus and departments will assist in implementing the fund's project while bearing all the related expenses. without seeking to cover them with money from the fund. The operation of the support fund is overseen by a committee with me as the convener and 8 members comprising directors of bureaus and department heads. The director of accounting services serves as the fund's accountant who manages cash flow and keeps accounting records. The fund's accounts will be submitted to the director of audit for audit. In line with the statutory requirements, reports will also be tabled in the Legislative Council. In emergency support, our goal is to make it swift, precise, accessible, and comprehensive. Swiftness means rapid action. Precision means money goes where it is needed most. Accessibility means making it easy for residents to get and use the support. Comprehensiveness means providing a full range of support for all those directly hit by the fire. Guided by these principles, we announced an emergency cash subsidy of $10,000 per affected household the day after the fire. On November 28th, we announced also a living allowance of $50,000 per household, and then on December 4th, this allowance was increased to $100,000. We also announced a token of solidarity at $200,000 and a funeral grant of $50,000 for the family of each deceased victim. On December 1st, we further announced $50,000 or $100,000 in injury grant for each hospitalized victim, along with $20,000 in assistance for each affected student, worker, and foreign domestic helper. On December 10th, we provided a special grant of $100,000 for each affected property owner. After the fire, the government immediately arranged emergency accommodation for up to 4,400 affected residents in accommodation in hotels, youth hostels, transitional housing, Hong Kong Housing Society projects or units at the Po interim housing in Tuen Mun. However, we understand that the various exigencies of life may have led many residents to prefer more stable housing that better suit their family needs. Therefore, on December the 18th, we announced an annual rent subsidy of $150,000 per household each year for 2 years, totaling $300,000, and a one-time relocation subsidy of $50,000 for each owner. Tenants, on the other hand, will receive a relocation subsidy of $50,000 to help them find alternative rental options. To minimize the financial burden on affected residents, the government has adopted several exceptional relief measures, including concessions for taxes, government rents, and rates for affected property owners and residents for the 2024-25 year of assessment. We have also waived fees for residents to replace identity documents, use columbaria and related funeral services, and access medical services including medication at public hospitals. The Immigration Department has deployed a special team to assist affected residents in replacing identity documents such as identity cards, birth certificates, passports, etc. That department also coordinated with China Travel Service Hong Kong to arrange special sessions for residents to replace their home return permit. For bereaved families, the Social Welfare Department has deployed social workers and clinical psychologists to the Wang Fuk Community Hall and Fushan Public Mortuary. They stayed by the side of the members and relatives throughout the identification of deceased persons through photographs or human remains while offering immediate emotional support and counseling. The Food and Environmental Hygiene Department has set up a support counter at the Fushan Mortuary to assist families with funeral arrangements, including body identification, coffin burial, and cremation services, and niche allocation. The Financial Services and Treasury Bureau has worked with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, the Securities and Futures Commission, the Insurance Authority, and the Mandatory Provident Fund Schemes Authority to establish a one-stop mechanism. That's to facilitate inquiries from bereaved families about the account held by the deceased with various financial institutions. The judiciary has formed a dedicated task force led by the Chief Judge of the High Court to ensure fast-track proceedings for legal matters related to the incident across all court levels without compromising the administration of justice. Moreover, the Legal Aid Department has also formed a special task force to streamline application procedures and expedite approvals for eligible residents and other affected individuals to receive legal aid as soon as possible. On donations in kind, The government has worked with the information technology sector to create an online donation platform. After assessing residents' actual needs, the platform matches demand with donated supplies. To date, over 60,000 items across various categories, including food and drinks, clothing, daily necessities, bedding, and electrical appliances, have been sent to locations where they are needed, delivering care and warmth to residents. That concludes my opening remarks. I welcome comments from members on our support efforts. I will give a reply in my concluding speech. Madam President, I so submit. I invite members to support the government's motion.
Deputy Financial Secretary. President, I thank members for their concerns on the arrangement of long-term accommodation for the residents in Wang Fuk Court. In the following, I'm going to share the relevant arrangements made by the Task Force on Emergency Accommodation, our considerations, the plans we are mulling over, and also our latest progress. In terms of overall direction, as the Chief Executive indicated clearly earlier on, the long-term accommodation plan should be compassionate and reasonable. Among the two, we should give priority to compassion. And also, we need to consider a wide range of factors, including residents' preferences, society's opinions, and the proper use of public resources. On the 9th of January, we have started a new phase of work in terms of making long-term arrangements for accommodation. Through the one social worker per household service, through questionnaires, we try to understand the wishes and preferences of property owners. We stress that the responses given by households at this stage does not represent making a choice for future options. Their final decisions will be in no way bound by their answers in the questionnaire. Various options have been put forward in the questionnaires. Allow me to explain the major considerations. First and foremost, we want to give residents choices. We may not be able to entertain the wish of each and every household. However, we will strive to provide as many options as possible. These options can target various needs of residents while helping residents to overcome difficulties in reaching a reasonable choice. That is why we raised the option to have the housing authority repurchase the property rights from the property owners. We are aware that certain property owners may wish to purchase another HOS flat. That's why we have provided the options of doing so cross-district or within Tai Po. And also we understand that because of family circumstances, some households may not wish to receive a large amount of cash. This is understandable. That's why we put forward the option of flat-for-flat exchange. Property owners may trade the flats with the government for an HOS flat of comparable price. Many residents have indicated that they wish to have the final arrangement available as soon as possible, and that the interim period should be as short as possible. In the questionnaire, we have provided some information for residents' reference in terms of the timetable of various options. For example, the cash for property rights arrangements would be the quickest way to offer property owners a new flat. This is the option with the greatest autonomy and flexibility. For sale of property rights and repurchase of HOS flat and also the flat-for-flat option, we have also provided a timetable of completion of future HOS and public housing projects. Concerning rehousing in the same district, we have provided some estimations and our initial views for residents' consideration and for further discussion in society. Madam President, I would like to address several issues which have attracted much public attention recently. In raising the option of repurchasing property rights by the Housing Authority, we have quoted the estimation given by the Hong Kong Institute of Surveyors on the pre-fire market price of Wang Fuk Court with premium unpaid. In terms of sellable area, the price was $6,000 per square foot. For flats with premium paid, it is $8,000 per square foot. I reiterate, it is simply for the sake of reference, rather than the final offer given by the government. We also understand that many residents would like to be given a long-term accommodation in the Tai Po district. In this regard, the work site on Chung Au Road West will be the quickest option with the largest flat yield. We expect a flat yield of about 1,500 units. The 900 units in the first phase will be able to take in population in the second half of 2029. The 600 units in phase 2 will also be able to take in population 10 months after that. Compared with the usual 6 years period for ordinary HOS projects, the Chung Au Road West option can save 2 years' time. In a moment, the Secretary for Housing will give a more detailed explanation in a moment. The Chung Au Road West site is comparable in terms of the ancillary support for residents compared with other mature housing projects. This is also the proposal made by many political parties and legislative members. Finally, I would like to address the option of on-site rebuilding. In the questionnaire, we said that the option of on-site rebuilding may take 9 to 10 years. That is, population intake will begin only at 2035 or even 2036. Compared with the timetable of 2029 for Chung Au Road West and also 2027 or 28 for other cross-district HOS projects, the wait for on-site rebuilding will be very long. Now, what explains the time gap is that we need to first demolish the buildings on site. To do that, we need to sort out the property rights issue and other legal issues for each and every household. Construction will take 4 to 5 years and demolition will take 1.5 years. That means that it is very challenging for us to be able to overcome all the issues in relation to property rights and legal issues. There are many legislative members who are experts in terms of legal issues and similar matters. I look forward to hearing their invaluable views. President, we give our condolences to affected residents and families in grief in the fire. My task force will continue to give consideration to compassion and reason while taking compassion as a priority and carefully consider the wishes of residents and also public opinions and also proper use of public opinions and submit a long-term plan to the Chief Executive. I also submit, I hope members will support my motion.
Secretary for Security. President, I'm now going to present to members the work carried out by the Security Bureau and its departments in relation to the fire. We are taking the investigation into the fire extremely seriously. We are determined to hold all those responsible to account. The Interdepartmental Fire Investigation Task Force led by the Fire Services Department is actively working to establish the cause of the fire and why it spread so quickly. The police and the ICC also established a joint team to conduct a comprehensive criminal investigation. To date, the police have arrested 22 individuals in connection with the fire, 16 on suspicion of manslaughter, and 6 on suspicion of fraud. Additionally, the police have arrested 8 people for allegedly taking advantage of the fire to commit fraud and are also thoroughly investigating related cases of suspected use of false certificates for scaffold nets. And the ICAC has also arrested 14 individuals. To prevent a tragedy like this from happening again, the government immediately established a working group on strengthening fire safety governance, which is chaired by me. Following the fire, targeted measures have been introduced immediately, alongside medium and long-term plans. Short-term measures include, firstly, a dedicated inspection team being set up to comprehensively check the fire service installations and equipment in buildings undergoing major repairs. The team has completed inspections of approximately 250 high-risk buildings. Second, setting up around-the-clock rapid response unit to inspect the operations of fire service installations and equipment while attending to fire in buildings. Responsible persons are required to take immediate remedial action for any violations. Enforcement action is taken decisively. Third, enhancing awareness and warning residents when major fire service installations will be out of service. It is required that notices be displayed in conspicuous locations and on the activated installations, and leaflets be put in residents' letterboxes detailing the suspension arrangements. Fourth, strengthening public education and training for owners, corporations, and property management companies. That would include encouraging them to increase the frequency of fire alarm tests to at least every 6 months, holding at least one fire drill per year with a fire safety briefing held beforehand, conduct regular inspections of means of escape, and keep proper records. Prior to major building maintenance, inspecting and repairing fire service installations. Fifth, carrying out special fire inspections and enforcement operations in commercial buildings with a high concentration of licensed premises during high-risk periods such as long public holidays to reduce relevant risks. The medium to long-term measures include first launching a risk-based program to inspect fire service installations in buildings, prioritizing premises fitted with old-style installations, and carrying out functional tests on the fire service installations and equipment. Second, reviewing the action strategy for major fire incidents. Third, making effective use of innovative technology to enhance firefighting and rescue efficiency, comprehensively reviewing the configuration of firefighting equipment, and actively drawing on the experience of the mainland and other places to explore the introduction of more advanced technologies and equipment. Fourth, making effective use of big data and AI to analyze risk data obtained from inspections and develop corresponding measures and plans, and accelerating the rollout of the Internet of Things fire detection system to enhance firefighting and rescue efficiency. Fifth, deepening rescue cooperation and coordination within the Greater Bay Area, incorporating major fire incidents into the cooperation framework and joint drills, and optimizing the procedures for coordinated firefighting operations across Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau. 6. Optimizing cooperation mechanisms with other departments in policy, inspections, enforcement, and crisis management. 7. Actively looking into the possibility of introducing legislative amendments, including those reviewing the statutory obligations of property management companies, elevating some of the administrative measures I mentioned to legal requirements, introducing a fixed penalty regime to promptly address and rectify easily verifiable breaches such as blocking the means of escape, introducing new statutory requirements that any suspension of operations of a primary fire service installation must be preceded by an application and the full implementation of additional fire safety measures required by the fire services department, and substantially increasing the penalties for registered contractors issuing false or misleading certificates for fire service installations and equipment from the current maximum fine of 50,000 Hong Kong dollars and may include imprisonment. President, I so submit and implore members to support the government motion. Thank you.
Secretary for Development. Madam President, I will focus on 2 areas of work involving systemic reform. First, regulation of construction. Early last year, the Development Bureau proposed changes to the Buildings Ordinance. Among the proposals were changes to toughen the regulation of registered building professionals and registered contractors, as well as stiffer penalties. In response to the Tai Po fire, we will propose a broader range of revisions to to reform the regulatory regime for large-scale building maintenance. We're looking at 5 directions. First, large-scale maintenance projects are Class 2 minor works. We're considering upgrading these works to Class 1 minor works. That means, in the future, for these projects, people will have to hire not just project contractors, but also third-party professionals to submit the plans. And they also have to hire professionals to submit supervision plans. The buildings department will receive these plans and proposals, and then the BD can intervene and regulate the process. Second, empowering the BD to lay down requirements that will clarify what is meant by taking appropriate preventive measures. With greater clarity, there will be sufficient legal basis for prosecution down the road. The third area has to do with building materials. The Buildings Ordinance currently has wording along the lines of defective materials or materials that do not comply with the provisions of this ordinance. That's generic language. In the future, we will make those standards statutory requirement so that there is a more straightforward and swifter way for us to pursue prosecution, and there will be stiffer penalties. Fourth, we will reform the registration and disciplinary regime for registered inspectors and small works or minor works. And even when an offense has nothing to do with building quality or technical matters such as a breach of the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance, disciplinary measures can still apply, and that will be among the factors to be considered for renewal. There will be a risk-based approach for inspections of buildings, and we will enhance that. Our goal is to submit the bill for scrutiny within this year. We're also looking to enhance the support for owners' corporations for building maintenance. The URA is established under an ordinance. Its role covers not just promoting redevelopment in old districts. Its role also includes fostering building rehabilitation. We believe in a bigger role for the URA. Now the URA runs the Smart Tender scheme. Through the URA, we will introduce a reformed Smart Tender scheme. We will do that to reduce the risk of collusion between different contractors and works consultants. And that will involve efforts on 3 fronts. On Smart Tender, there will be a more rigorous pre-qualification list. Parties looking to provide consultancy or services through Smart Tender, we will look at whether they have conviction or disciplinary records. Those contractors will also have to go through background screening with the police or the ICAC. When we consider the experience and performance of contractors, we look at not just the projects completed in the past. We also look at the results, or rather the feedback of departments and building owners in the past. Contractors will have to meet the requirements on all those fronts before they can show up on the list of this pre-qualification list. We will also work with the URA on a mechanism to remove contractors from the list. The URA will be doing more than just advising on Smart Tender. The URA will help with the tendering and the assessment of tenders. If a building applies for government funding, as part of the funding condition, the URA will also play a role in selecting the consultants and contractors. For buildings not applying for government subsidies, the URA will work through the URA. So there will still be tendering and assessment of tenders through the URA. The URA will continue to provide advice on selecting contractors. That will help building owners make informed decisions. Third, on buildings that look to apply for government subsidies, once the work starts, at milestones of the works, say variations of works, or there is an increase in the cost, a report will need to be made to the URA, and then the URA will offer independent advice to the building owners. These proposals are being explored with the senior management of the URA. We're looking at ways to implement certain parts of the proposal first. These are the systemic changes. Apart from that, we will also look at the testing mechanism for building materials. Construction projects cover a wide range of materials, so we have to take a phased approach to this review. We will take a risk-based approach. We will look at the materials that warrant strict scrutiny, so there will be inspections, on-site sampling, and testing. I will be listening attentively to the views put forward by members. Thank you.
Secretary for Housing. President and members, the number 5 alarm fire at Wang Fuk Court, Tai Po was heartbreaking. In the aftermath of the fire, government departments have rolled out immediate support and relief work to help the affected residents in every way possible, among which the Housing Bureau immediately contacted the organizers and operators of transitional housing projects and arranged for affected residents to move into transitional housing projects, housing society projects, and the Po-Tin interim housing operated by the Housing Authority. Some 3,600 residents have moved into 1,600 units. Now, with temporary accommodation completed, public focus has shifted to the long-term accommodation plan for residents. Through the one social worker per household service, we have tried to understand the preference of affected residents. I also want to listen to members' views and public opinions in today's debate. It has come to my attention that several issues have stood out in the public discussion. I would like to make this opportunity to provide more information so that the society and the Council may conduct a rational, balanced, and informed discussion. First of all, whether the structure of the fire-damaged building is still intact. After the fire, the Housing Department has mobilized more than 100 professionals to team up with the Housing Department's independent checking units to conduct a survey on the 7 affected buildings. It was found that the reinforced concrete walls, beams, and floor panels of the buildings have suffered various degrees of weakening and damages due to extremely high temperature. That includes cracking, spalling of concrete, and exposure and distortion, banding of steel bars. Whether these reinforced concrete components can maintain their resilience, loading, and resistance to fire and seepage is greatly uncertain. One may say that these buildings have suffered great internal damages. Also, the high temperature during the fire has damaged the utility systems in and outside the units, as well as the fire services, installations, and elevator system in the communal areas. It is difficult to guarantee that the long-term safety requirements and resilience of these buildings will be up to standard. They will also entail a large sum of maintenance fees in the future. Although there is no immediate danger to the 7 buildings, but we think that it is very likely that the 7 buildings will have to be demolished. You may have noticed that one of our accommodation options in the questionnaire is for affected residents to sell their property rights and select a brand new HOS flag, or exchange the Wang Fuk Court flags for a brand new HOS flag of comparable prices. Here, I would like to give some explanation on these options for the affected residents so they can consider the best option. In the scenario of a buyback by the government, after the sale of the property rights, property owners may receive a sum of money. Then these property owners may choose to buy new flags in the private market or the secondary HOS market. The Housing Authority will consider setting aside some units in the upcoming HOS and Green Form HOS exercise for Wang Fuk Court residents through a special sales exercise. And also the site at Tai Po Chunga Road West was set aside for public housing. Now we are actively modifying the design so that it will also be suitable for HOS flags. Site formation has been completed and we have already started power driving. We can save 2 years' time and start population intake for the projects by 2029 for the 900 flags. And these will be made available for Wang Fuk Court's residents in the special sales exercise. Now for elderly residents, they may not like the option. They could choose to exchange the flags for a new HOS flag of comparable price. Similarly, this will be done through a special sale exercise. In this scenario, the amounts will be paid on their behalf by the government to the Housing Authority. We are also aware that there are concerns in society that by creating a special sales exercise for the affected residents and also converting the public housing project at Chunga Road West for HOS development, it may be unfair to those waiting for public housing or those who would like to purchase HOS flags. But it is our belief that the arrangement would not harm the benefits. Through these terms of the government's efforts, we have changed the backloaded situation of public housing supply. We have been providing some 30,000 units per year. And also, despite the proposal to change the use of Chunga Road West site for HOS flags, we have already identified another site in the same area to convert the 1,400 units to HOS flags, or rather public housing units. For the applicants who would like to purchase subsidized sales flags, we plan to set aside a certain quota in every development project for the purchase by Wang Fuk Court residents. In the next 5 years, housing supply will be very high. It is expected to reach 58,900, almost 50% more than when this government came to office. And also, the number of HOS flags sold each year has increased from 4,000 units every year several years ago to 9,000 flags. Supply has increased and residents have much better chances to buy HOS flags. Finally, we understand that there may be different preferences among the affected residents. Despite that, they share the consensus that the government should roll out the long-term accommodation work as soon as possible. Now, through the questionnaire, we would like to create more viable options so that we can give affected residents more choices. We will accompany the affected residents on this journey to finalize a long-term accommodation plan and help them settle down. Thank you. So submit.
Secretary for Home and Youth Affairs. President, I am now going to report to the Legislative Council various areas of work of the Home and Youth Affairs Bureau. On emergency support and fundraising, after the outbreak of a fire, the Home and Youth Affairs Bureau responded swiftly by immediately opening the community hall as a temporary shelter for residents, mobilizing the care team to provide assistance to residents, coordinating the collection and distribution of emergency supplies and providing a $10,000 emergency cash subsidy to each household. On the day following the fire, the government immediately set up the support fund for Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po, which has so far launched 11 assistance programs with a commitment of about $1.2 billion, accounting for about 30% of the total amount. Most of the assistance is dispersed through the one social worker per household mechanism, which reduces the complexity of the application procedures to speed up the disbursement process. On emergency short-term accommodation, the HYAB immediately coordinated with the operators of various hotels and youth hostels or camps on the night of the fire to provide 14 days of free emergency accommodation to residents for temporary stay. Subsequently, after discussions initiated by the Bureau, the hotel and youth hostel operators were willing to provide flexible arrangements for those who had actual needs far exceeding the 14 days as originally pledged. The cumulative number of residents staying in the hotel rooms and youth hostels or camps coordinated by the Bureau has exceeded 1,600. On estate management, in response to the unprecedented challenges faced in relation to the management of Wang Fuk Court after the fire, which would be far beyond the capacity of the management committee of a general owners corporation. The government has received views from many residents wishing to take over management of the owners corporation. So for the first time ever, the government invoked the building management ordinance to apply to the lands tribunal to dissolve the original management committee of Wang Fuk Court and appoint Hop-On Management Company Limited, a member of the China Chem Group, as the manager. The application was approved on 6th of January this year by the lands tribunal. Hop-On has completed the renewal of its registration with the land registry and is now embarking on a series of key tasks, including taking over from the former property management company and receiving various documents relating to the owners corporation, and will contact the former members of the management committee in the coming days to follow up on relevant matters. The professionals engaged by Hop-On will conduct detailed analyses of the documents obtained to clarify the legal liabilities and interests of the owners corporation and owners, and also assist in ascertaining the status of the owner corporation's accounts. To ensure the flow of information, Hop-On will set up an online platform as soon as possible to keep in touch with residents and collect their views on management issues. A dedicated team of the Home Affairs Department has already establish a coordination mechanism with Hop-On to meet regularly and provide necessary support. The manager will not receive any fee for this appointment, President. And Nina Wong Charity Management Limited has pledged to donate a total of $10 million to cover the relevant expenses of the measure. This should alleviate the financial burden on Wang Fuk Court owners. In order to continue to optimize building management, we have embarked on a review of the building management ordinance with a view to improving relevant legislation. In fact, the Building Management Amendment Ordinance 2024, which has come into effect in July 2025, has introduced a new category of large-scale maintenance procurement, as well as related tendering and declaration requirements. It requires that a voting in-person threshold be met for large-scale maintenance procurement, so as to encourage more owners to participate personally in decisions of major resolutions, minimize potential disputes, and enhance the protection of owners' interests. In response to the recommendations made by the Task Force on Investigation and Regulation chaired by the Chief Secretary, we will strengthen the requirements by requiring OCs to set different levels of owners' voting requirements according to the contract sums when resolving works or expenditure items. For example, the higher the amount of the item, the higher the voting in-person threshold of the owners, so as to enhance owners' awareness of and participation in major maintenance works. Based on the experience of the last legislative amendment exercise, we have initially drawn up the 5 following major areas for amendments. 1. Decision on major maintenance works and large-scale procurement to raise the voting threshold for the conduct of major maintenance works and large-scale procurement and make consequential amendments to relevant legislation in light of the new mode of spot tender proposed by the Development Bureau. 2. Proxy instruments to improve the regime for handling proxy instruments, for example, to impose an upper limit on the holding of proxy instruments for large-scale maintenance procurement and enhance the transparency of proxy instruments. This should prevent the unauthorized signing of proxy instruments by non-owners. 3rd, declaration of interests To further improve the system for declaration of interest in relation to large-scale maintenance procurement, to ensure the transparency and fairness of the procurement process. Fourth, meeting procedures. To clarify the arrangements for the convening, agenda cancellation, and adjournment or suspension of owners' meetings. To provide clearer powers for following up as well. And I'm sure some members know these are often areas where confusion would arise. 5. Powers of the authority. To provide the authority with more powers to intervene and provide assistance in special circumstances where the management committee cannot function properly or is unable to deal with owners' corporation matters. We will consult the property management sector, owners' corporations, and owners on the relevant proposals to further amend the building management ordinance, and will also collect local views through the building management working groups to be set up in district councils. We will very soon submit the various amendment proposals to the LegCo for further discussion. I so submit. Thank you, President.
會請勞
Secretary for Labor and Welfare, and then I will call upon members to speak. Secretary for Labor and Welfare. Madam President, the fire in Wang Fuk Court was unprecedented in its scale. More than 100 people either lost their lives or sustained injuries. More than 1,900 households no longer have their homes. Confronted with such a disaster, the Labor and Welfare Bureau and the Social Welfare Department's first priority is to offer immediate support and follow-up services for every single affected resident. That's why the Social Welfare Department mobilized nearly 2,000 social workers across the department to implement the special measure of one social worker for each household. Each household got assigned a dedicated social worker, and that social worker is joined by 2 to 3 civil servants as a squad. They give support to those households in the form of emotional support, counseling, and respite services. They also help those households apply for assistance to make life easier for them. The social workers also help government departments share information. They become bridges between those residents and the government so that the government can deliver the relief and support more effectively. Those social workers have been closely in touch with the residents over the past month or so to find out about their circumstances and needs. The needs and support required by each household varies. The challenges confronting them also change over time. That's why the Social Welfare Department will continue to provide this special service to ensure every household is well looked after and supported. And that's also to stay by their side through this rough patch so that the fire victims move on from the trauma and resume normal life. Separately, on enhancing construction site safety, we will also adopt 2 measures. First, a smoking ban on construction sites across the board. The government will legislate for such a ban at all construction sites. Current legislation allows the Labor Department to assess the risk of flammable items on site, and then the LD can issue written orders to ban smoking on particular sites. This requirement is enforced in light of the circumstances of each work site. There are constraints for enforcement. To enable a comprehensive smoking ban, the Labor Department has started working on amendments to the construction site safety regulations. This is to impose clear legal liability for the main contractor, the subcontractors, and everyone else on construction sites. There will be a rigorous ban on smoking at construction sites. This is to reduce the fire risks at construction sites as a result of smoking. Our goal is to submit this amendment proposal in the next few weeks to the Legislative Council. I call on members to support our proposal so that we can get it passed sooner and heavily implemented. Second, to prevent workers and objects from falling from scaffolds. On those scaffolds, there are what we call stepping boards. The Labor Department will amend the Code of Practice for scaffolding. There will be clear requirements on the materials for the stepping boards to reduce fire risks. I will be listening attentively to the valuable views from members on one social worker per household and also stepping up site safety. I so submit.
Mr. Gary Chen. Thank you, President. President, the fire at Wang Fuk Court touched the hearts of every Hong Kongers and electrical member. On the day of the fire, at 5 p.m., I arrived at the scene. Afterwards, I and my team have stayed there until midnight. Then in the next week, I've been helping the affected residents in shelters. I saw Madam President there as well. Now the DAB has gotten in touch with more than 1,000 households. Immediately after the fire, the DAB has proposed 5 compensation plans and 4 possible relocation sites to the government. In the entire process, I saw how the government was committed to support the affected residents, from the chief executive to secretaries, directors, and frontline workers. Every one of them has been helping the residents with all their hearts. I recognize their efforts. My focus today is on the accommodation plan and the affected residents' wishes. There are a lot of different opinions, but there are 2 consensus that it must be quick and it must be in Tai Po. Just go and ask any affected residents. They will tell you the same. So this morning, we heard a series of proposals for compensation and rehousing for residents. I think these options have taken into consideration the different needs of every household. For some households, they may still be paying the mortgages. For some, they have paid the premium and they have already purchased the flat. The most important thing is to offer a viable option for residents to choose according to their own circumstances. Now, there are 2 controversial issues. One is on-site rebuilding. Some residents may want to be rehoused in situ to maintain their social network, but that option comes with a 15-year wait. That may not be a viable option for some residents. Now, I think the timetable given by the government serves a good reference point. If I choose to wait for rehousing in situ, then I have to wait for a very long time. For those who would like to have a quicker option, they may choose the Chung Nga Road West site. Some may say that it is a very remote site, but I'm a member from the district. It is right next to a new housing estate that is Fu Yip Estate. There are lots of supporting facilities. Nearby, there are Fu Heng Estates and Fu Xin Estates. There are public transport interchanges. It is not remote at all. Just give the site a chance. So for those who choose the Chung Nga Road West option, that would be the best option. Now, of course, we can't guarantee that all residents would choose the same option, but we can't take a scattered approach to rebuilding. We can't build 2 blocks here and 2 blocks there. So we may have to make concessions. But that's okay because some residents may choose other options like flag-for-flag exchange, buying other HOS flags, or even receive a cash compensation and buy flags in the private market. So the most important thing is to offer more options to residents rather than forcing the hands. In fact, the options given by the government now are very flexible. It gives them autonomy. So my point is, it's more than just rebuilding the buildings, but rebuilding homes and rebuilding the hope for the future and the trust in the governments on the behalf of the residents. I so submit to support the motion. Ms. Carmen Can. President, the Hong Kong SAR government has lived up to its promise. At the first meeting of this term of LegCo, it moves the motion to support the relief work at Wang Fuk Court. This is a very saddening disaster. We need to take this opportunity to reform the system. Now, the three task forces come into play here. The task force on investigation and regulation is independent. This task force must cooperate with the independent investigation committee to conduct investigative work. It is the Wang Fuk Court incident sounded an alarm that we need to take out comprehensive reform and take down vested interest barriers. Now, the task force on emergency support and fundraising must answer to this council on how it spends the $4 billion support fund. Now, the support fund was established under the Secretary for Housing and Youth Affairs Ordinance. The budget must be approved and supervised by the LegCo. Now, in terms of donation, we need to offer tax concession or even double tax concession for the donors. Now, I'm pleased to see the options given by the task force on emergency accommodation. I'm pleased to see that the task force is engaging the residents for their views. I agree that compassion should be given priority, but at the same time, we need to be reasonable and work within the laws. For certain scenarios, we need to consider the best use of public resources as well. I am aware that property owners have different views on the long-term accommodation plan. There are several options given by the questionnaire. First, a buyback by the government with cash. It is quick and it is flexible. And there is also another similar plan. With the amount of money, property owners can purchase HOS flags in the 2025 exercise. Now, these options will come with a price tag of $3 to $4 billion in public coffer. Now, can we also offer more tax concession to encourage members of society to chip in? Now, there is also the flag-for-flag exchange. Now, the Hong Kong Institute of Surveyor has provided an estimate on the pre-fire market value of the blocks. But I think we should make reference to more surveys and analysis. Now, the benefits of the flag-for-flag exchange is that it is essentially a bartering exercise without involving cash. Now, it is not in the same district, but there are more options. Now, finally, concerning the on-site rebuilding option, it will come with great legal uncertainty and time cost. Now, I have read the relevant covenants of mutual deeds and conveyancing documents carefully. In terms of demolition and rebuilding, the ownership of the communal parts and also the use of insurance compensation payments, they are very complicated. Now, for the Grenfell Tower incidents in the UK, it is after 9 years when a new project can start in situ. It shows that on-site rebuilding involves huge time cost. Now, no matter which option the government chooses, the government must make sure that all the relevantly legal wrinkles are ironed out. For example, the subjugation right. The government should work hand in hand with insurance company to sort out these matters. Now, the quicker the buyback exercise starts, the easier it is. Now, for some options, it would reduce the number of HOS flats for sale by the housing authority. That would affect people on the waiting list. Now, the independent committee will have to submit a report to the chief executive according to the terms of reference in 9 months. Now, there are compared with other ordinances, for example, establishing a commission of inquiry, these are not the best options. Now, we can't miss this option. We have to be practicable and assist those affected by the fire while implementing overall reforms so that we will get to the bottom of this matter and prevent tragedies from happening again. Dr. Thomas So. Thank you, President. I speak in support of the motion moved by the Chief Secretary for Administration. The motion proposed to take up follow-up work on 3 aspects, that is relief work, accommodation, and also systemic reform. Now, amidst the grief, we need to move forward. As a member of the new term of LegCo, I have the responsibility to support this government motion. It is very meaningful. This motion and other relevant work will help the deceased to rest and also help the surviving family members to grieve and also to ensure that justice is served. Now, I'm concerned about the legal needs of the 2,000 affected households and also with the use of mitigation and law tech, we can provide better help to the residents. I will follow up on this on other platforms as well. Now, as a former president of the Law Society, I've been working hand in hand with the Law Society to provide online and offline legal consultation services for affected residents. I've also offered free online mediation session. Now, because of the loss of home, the legal needs of affected residents have surpassed the scope offered by the government. Now, there are 2 stages, pre-claim and during the claim. Now, for the pre-claim stage, there are a lot of livelihood issues. For example, the loss of important documents like marriage certificates, conveyancing documents, and birth certificates. Now, for the second stage, that is during claim, there are issues like insurance coverage and evidence gathering. Now, the third realm is livelihood issues. For example, the employment contract of foreign domestic helper, mortgage contracts, probates, death inquiries, and also the custody rights of surviving children. Now, it shows that at the pre-claim stage, the legal needs of affected residents is already great. In terms of those items requiring payments of government fee, I think the government should waive them all. Now, because the sheer number of households affected, the government should conduct a study on how to better support the legal needs or the pre-claim legal needs of residents. On one hand, we need to sort out the proxy issue and also the issue of fees. Now, to avoid putting financial burden on the government should consider something similar to the healthcare voucher. The government should offer legal service vouchers to residents to cover their legal needs. Now, with fire, there comes claims. So at the claim stage, the legal needs will be different. There are some 2,000 affected households, and they will have different goals in terms of claim. Now, we have a very tight situation of legal resources, and there is a huge backlog of cases. When there are more than 2,000 civil claims being filed at the same time with the court, it will worsen the burden on the judiciary. And also, residents will be bogged down by the long waiting time, and it will add to the financial and emotional burden. Now, considering the needs of the 2,000 households affected, The government should adhere to the mediation first principle and encourage these claims to be dealt with through mediation first to avoid the burden on judiciary. Now, I declare interest. I have been actively promoting the development of online dispute resolution platform. Concerning post-fire claims, I urge the government to make good use of law tech and online services to support the use of mediation as a means to address the claims filed by residents so that they can be given a viable compensation in a highly efficient manner. Thank you.
英議員。
Mr. Chan Chen-ying, President, when faced with an unexpected tragedy, we have seen support from the Central People's Government. The SAR government has really demonstrated great capabilities in dealing with the disaster. We have also seen support from different sectors. As a representative of the financial sector, I immediately worked with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority and the banking sector to provide financial support to affected residents, including having an account for the support of residents and the free use of custodians boxes. And I myself also made donations to affected residents. I do support what is said in the motion, and I hope the government can update its progress of reforms regularly at the council. We have seen the government launching short and medium-term reform measures already. We have also seen some residents being rehoused, but then some are still living in their relatives' and friends' homes. There are different options available for rehousing inside redevelopment, in situ redevelopment, redevelopment in another location, etc. But we have also an option for in situ redevelopment. Right now, the accident investigation has yet to be completed, and we would have a long timeline for reconstruction. It is not beneficial for the rebuilding of the lives of the victims of the fire. I believe the most flexible and essentially the quickest option would be the SAR government acquiring the ownership of Wang Fuk Court flats with the pre-disaster market value, and residents can receive the funds right away and purchase properties. They can rent a property before repurchasing, or they can do different options. And as Mr. Michael Wong said, to acquire ownership of 1,900 odd households, it would cost approximately $6 billion. If we have to spend public money for this, it will be unprecedented. We need to be prudent. Right now, the support fund has $4.3 billion. It seems that on surface, the government would have to make up for the gap of $3 billion. But the thing is, we are still receiving donations. The government can continue to encourage donations made. I think in the end, the government would only have to meet the gap of about $2 billion. And if we account for the current tax base, it would just cost approximately $1,000 per taxpayer. I think we can consider this option. We also need to make sure we are initiating fire safety reforms. We need to make sure the fire service installations are operating normally. And last December, we had in Qingyi Chang'an Estate, there was a fire in a unit. The fire alarm did not sound. So this seems to be a prevalent issue. The Fire Services Department is initiating reforms and enhancing transparency and management of fire service installations. If fire service installations do not work normally, the impact can be serious. And we also should strengthen controls by introducing a contractor certification regime. If violations are found, we need to make sure to record that, and if there are multiple records of violations, we need to revoke the licenses of the registered contractors. Right now, forms have to be filled out after checks, and the Fire Services Department can request that contractors upload the relevant forms for ease of supervision. Some citizens are not familiar with how fire service installations work and maybe how hoses work. The government has proposed to hold a fire drill at least every year and have briefings held. I appreciate that because that will enhance citizens' awareness. I so submit, President. Mr. Tang Fei. We really need to focus on the needs of the people, and the first thing we're doing after the new electrical term takes effect is to think about how to follow up on the Wang Fuk Court fire. We need to think about both the hardware and the software. For hardware, we have seen government departments quickly initiating different support measures, and the Education Bureau has disbursed different grants to secondary, primary schools and kindergartens for holding of specific activities. And we have also some relevant associations in commissioning a emotional support hotline, as well as working with professional associations to coordinate counseling sessions to be provided. Helping those affected would be a task in the long term, and sometimes emotional issues do not arise right away. We have seen the government commencing investigation. We should see more media reports as we have more updates. When we have more reports, the affected teachers and students may encounter emotional issues. I think we need to follow up on this professionally and in a targeted manner. For SEN students with special education needs, they may face greater pressure than ordinary students. We need to provide more targeted professional counseling support for them. We should also pay close attention to digital footprint of students, because that is how we can identify early on suicidal tendencies. And we need to have counselors, social workers really focus on the needs of the students. For those who have to transfer to a different school, we need to have policy support in terms of class structure in schools. In mid-January, we will have the allocation mechanism of the secondary schools and the primary school allocation mechanism starting. We really need to have teachers be at their best, and we need to provide emotional support for them. We should also increase manpower to try to provide such emotional support to teachers. With the support and rebuilding work of Wang Fuk Court, there is much to follow up on. The things are quite complex, but the government should take a citizen-oriented approach to make sure citizens know that they care about them, as well as being determined to drive reforms. We really need to plug the policy loopholes and make legislative amendments if necessary. With disasters, we should still implement good governance, and that's how we can resolve this issue. This is what Confucius said, and we should work together to rebuild lives of affected residents, and we can then move on to a brighter future. Thank you. Mr. Yu Pat-Leung. President, after the Wang Fuk Court fire, we have the first agenda item for the Legislative Council discussing post-disaster and rebuilding work. I appreciate that. I hope that in future we will continue to have close cooperation between the executive and legislature so that the government policies can closely match the needs of citizens. We can see that the Central People's Government, the HKSAR government, and different sectors work together to support the affected citizens shortly after the fire, and we have a great number of emergency supplies. We also have the support fund amassing a sum of $4.3 billion. The government has provided different kinds of support: economic, financial, supplies, medical, emotional. I believe the immediate needs of affected residents have been met and addressed. As for long-term rehousing arrangements, it will take longer, but the government already has plans. I appreciate that the government has, through the one social worker per household mechanism, provided round-the-clock service and support for Wang Fuk Court residents. I believe over the past few months, we have quite a solid mechanism that we can, through social workers, understand the housing wishes of residents, and I believe feedback collected can be of reference in future. I hope the task force can, through social workers, set up profiles of different households so that we will have a systematic mechanism for assessment and analyses to follow up on the needs of residents, and for the deployment of manpower and resources to follow up on the needs of residents. The government needs to make sure also the social workers have support to ensure sustainability of such operations. The government should make sure to have compassion, but also have regard to practical and legal aspects. We want to make sure to take care of the long-term interests of citizens, provide options to them while ensuring proper allocation of public resources. We can have some options that have more flexible arrangements, allowing owners to be bought out. We also have other rehousing options, as well as the option of in situ redevelopment, but this will involve a long waiting period and complex procedures will be involved with the acquisition of ownership. We need to have the consent of a very high ratio of owners. And the thing is, the property will, even if we have in situ development, it may not have a high value in future due to the tragedy having taken place in that location. In fact, 40% of the residents of Wang Fuk Court are elderly persons. We need to make sure it is easy for them, and we need to make the process short. I believe the government will help residents make the reasonable and right choice for themselves. The fire really shows the different deep-rooted issues of building maintenance. We really need to learn from the experience and make sure to mitigate relevant risks to prevent reoccurrence of similar tragedy. The government, when setting up the independent committee, said there are different issues with different parts of the chain. We need to make sure we have in future material standards and to make sure we combat bid rigging in future. We need to break through the barriers of vested interests. As a LegCo member, I will work with the SAR government to review the loopholes in laws and monitor the operations of the government to drive reforms to build a brighter and safer Hong Kong. I so submit.
Mr. Kenneth Lau. Madam President, the fire in Tai Po led to the death of more than 1,000 residents lost their homes. This is a trauma for everyone in the community. We were all moved by this tragedy. I speak on behalf of the II.Govt in support for the motion moved by the Chief Secretary. We support the government's relief and recovery efforts, as well as support for residents, so that we give long-term assistance and we can also drive systemic reform. We should review legislation, we should crack down on bid rigging to build a safer Hong Kong. After the fire, the government moved swiftly by setting up the support fund. There are rental allowances, emergency cash, emotional support, as well as temporary accommodation to meet the pressing needs of residents. That shows the government put people first and acted with speed. But much remains to be done in our assistance. There's redevelopment and there are other issues. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority has already announced a 6-month moratorium for the home loan repayment for those housing estates. But what happens next? That worries all the residents. Mortgages involve many legal issues as well as insurance payout. Building structural safety also forms part of the equation. This is a complex equation, a complex issue. So I suggest the establishment of a task force involving not just the government but also the banking sector to fix the issue. And then there are also human remains that have yet to be identified, and that's holding up the insurance claims. Some of the deceased may be the breadwinners of the families. So I suggest interest-free loans for those families to tie those families over until they receive the insurance payout. That way, no family will fall into financial hardship because of such liquidity issues. The motion also mentions accommodation and long-term solutions, and that's the crux of the matter. The government has started gauging the views of each household on long-term housing. So one option is to have the government acquire the property rights or offer a flat-for-flat scheme, and then the residents can be rehoused either within the district or other options can be taken. I understand residents have different preferences. Some prefer staying within this district, meaning Tai Po, because of emotional ties. So we have to act in accordance with the circumstances. The majority view is to have accommodation as soon as they can. So we should be consolidating these views and then work out a solution to the satisfaction of everyone. Economic loss aside, residents are also left emotionally traumatized. Many residents witnessed how their homes went up in flames. Others escaped death only very narrowly, and it will take time for such trauma to heal. So I urge the government to step up medical and psychological support. We should send clinical psychologists and social workers who work as a team to reach out to those fire victims so that we offer ongoing support and assess whether PTSD is a problem. Now, there is a Baptist school in Tai Po. Some of those students are left emotionally scarred. So we should assess the school conditions and we should offer appropriate support. This tragedy exposed the flaws in building maintenance. We saw bid rigging. And then there were problems with the building materials. Our laws are due for an update, but I'm out of time, so I will have more to say when I speak on Mr. Mark Chong's motion. Madam President, much remains to be done for reconstruction. It's a tough task, but we have to rise to it. The government and LegCo should show commitment, and we should take an approach informed by compassion, reason, and the law so that we help residents put the trauma behind them. I so submit I support the motion. Ms. Chen Hoyan. Thank you, Madam President. More than 160 people died as a result of the fire. Roughly 2,000 households lost their homes. The follow-up work requires not just getting to the bottom of the issue, we have to plug loopholes. We also have to find a way that is both lawful and compassionate. We should help those residents put the trauma behind them so that their lives will not be consumed by this tragedy. We have been offering comprehensive assistance since the fire. Those fire victims need more than just food and shelter. For those roughly 2,000 households, they have all sorts of challenges confronting them, and they need different kinds of support. Some people are struggling with grief. Others worry about long-term housing. They want a stable home. Some prefer a flat within the district. Others want to move to other districts away from the tragedy. Still others want public rental housing. And then there are others who want redevelopment. We should offer these residents a choice. Leave it up to the residents. There are task forces within the government. One works on accommodation and another works on something else. We also have to be mindful that there are children of these residents who need to switch to different schools. They are emotionally distressed. We need a clearer mechanism to pool the resources and consolidate the resources so that we can meet the short, medium, and long-term needs. Say there are emotional needs. There is grief counseling for residents from NGOs. Many community groups also offer emotional support. But there's poor coordination, and then there is an overlap of resources. Some lack the expertise. Residents struggle to tell which service works best for them. So the government should set up an cross-departmental and interdisciplinary group to pool those resources and services. We have community non-profit, and we also have charity groups. This platform involving all parties should be more than just an ad hoc group. We should let this platform kick in whenever we get another disaster so that we offer faster and more effective support. This platform should also do something about the future work. Let's look at SARS, which happened many years ago. There was a trust fund, and that fund offered support for many years. Coming back to this fire, there may be 5 victims who need drugs and psychological support. So let's create a public-private partnership to allow these residents go to follow-up consultations without adding to the queue for public hospitals. I want to mention the one social worker per household scheme. They played a key role by offering timely support in the early days. But this scheme covers a wide range of services, and that's very challenging for the social workers. They already have a very heavy caseload. These social workers struggle to meet the many needs of the 5 victims, so we have to reposition this scheme. The social workers should be coordinators and work in tandem with the joint platform I just mentioned. Now, we used this scheme to gauge the views of 5 victims. I myself have been following up on the case involving a family of 3. The father and the mother can still work. They want to start a new life. And then they heard about the 10 years that it will take to rebuild Wang Fuk Court. They have decided to buy a different flat that they can afford. They don't want to wait. But they just want to have another look at their old flat to find out what's left. This is not possible yet. So we can see the needs vary from one family to the next. So we need to help these families. We should get a clear picture of what each household needs. That clarity will show these residents that we're all in this together, and they will be able to contribute. Ms. Jofi Chen. Thank you, Madam President. I support the government's motion. The fire took away lives and destroyed homes. The community was moved by this. So I extend my condolences to all those families. The new term of electrical took its oath on January 1st. This shows the lawmakers lost no time in their work. We all got to work on the recovery and relief and drive systemic reform to offer the community a greater sense of security. We had this unfortunate tragedy, but we all worked as one. Our civil servants, our discipline services, and care team members all worked tirelessly. A firefighter fell in the line of duty. Our police officers kept up the work in rescue and search. The community contributed in whatever way they could. After the fire, the FTU activated its emergency fund. In Southwest New Territories, our team helped those fire victims. I also worked with a construction sector trade union on inspecting the scaffolding in Chunwan and Kwaiching to give those local residents peace of mind. We need systemic reform of those institutions. We have to overcome the vested interest and do justice. And this is only fair for those fire victims. Old buildings need to be repaired and maintained. Owners' corporations are also an area where reform is due. I will have more to say about that in the next motion, but here I want to talk about accommodation, and that's top of mind for those fire victims. Look at the Chinese character for home. It's written like something with a roof on top. It offers shelter. You need a home for a sense of security. When I helped the fire victims, one case involved someone who spent their life savings on the home, and that home burned down. When I spent time with this person on a visit, this person told me they're now getting old, but their quality of life is suffering. They get $150,000 per year for rental allowances, but that only goes on for 2 years. They don't want to have to move again in 2 years' time. The fire victims we came into contact with want faster rehousing. I've met with different senior officials. We are all agreed on one point. We have to deliver on people's priorities, and we have to make good use of public funds. Those rental allowances cost roughly $260 million. At this rate, and we can also look at the case of Grenfell Tower in the UK. It was a council housing in 2017, 24 floors and roughly 129 units. The demolition started last September and is due to take 2 years, so for redevelopment it will take 10 years. So for us, we have $4.3 billion. 3/4 will have to go into rental allowances, and we are not even counting the redevelopment, the demolition. Many fire victims are seniors. They're very sad. They're worried that they may die waiting for the redevelopment. The needs vary from one family to the next. We have to respect their wishes, so we need different options, and we also need fallback options. Some property owners still have a home loan to pay off. We have to make sure the cash we give them is enough for them to pay for another flat. Can we offer public rental flats for them? The fire victims I worked with can see the sincerity of the government, and they have thank you cards. They want to give them to the government. There's a long way to go in recovery, but we have to rise to the occasion. There's accommodation, there's insurance payout. We have to stay by the side of those victims and work together. So submit.
Reverend Peter Kuhn. Thank you, President. By the end of last year, we had a catastrophic fire at Tai Po Wang Fuk Court. Every Hong Konger has been grieving. President Xi Jinping immediately voices concern for Hong Kong, and the central government has immediately offered help. I would like to thank the central government and the Hong Kong SL government for the rapid work after the fire. It's no mean feat. Now, one of the major hurdles we are facing is the accommodation issue for affected residents. Everyone would be supportive of an accommodation plan, but rather than accommodating the residents, there is still the issue of property ownership, which involves the use of public money. There are different opinions in society. Now, ultimately, I don't think it is impossible to have a plan which everyone is happy with. Now, in terms of the use of public money, I urge the government to be prudent. Besides respecting the wish of affected residents, there are different opinions in society calling for the government to balance their views. Now, there are concerns that this would become a precedent in dealing with future disasters. If you look back at the number 5 alarm fire back in 1996, after the fire, the industrial building has been left vacant until the URA has stepped in. Now, there is a more recent event. Back in 2010, there was a collapse incident at Mata Wai Road. The Chinese tenement building collapsed. Now, in the end, the government decided to buy back the property rights from the residents, that is the URA, bought back the property ownership from the residents. Now, I reiterate, we are sympathetic of the situation of the plight of the residents, and we agree that the government should help them. However, the government must strike a delicate balance between the use of public money in this. Now, the government must be transparent on why a certain option has been chosen, and also there must be an objective standard to the amount of money paid for buying back the flags. Otherwise, it would cause conflicts. Now, with the social worker per household service and also the civil servants, volunteers, residents were given sufficient help. This is a good practice. This should become a standard in case of any further catastrophe, so that all affected victims can receive help. Now, finally, I thank the Chief Executive for pledging to get to the bottom of this incident. I think this is something that all citizens want. We want an answer. There are many factors contributing to such a major catastrophe, but there must be some people who need to be held accountable. So the independent committee and the government should investigate the cause of the fire as soon as possible and hold those accountable to liability to serve justice. I support the motion. Thank you. Mr. Kenneth Fok. Thank you, President. I speak in support of the motion moved by the Chief Secretary for Administration. Once again, I give my condolences to the victims and also the surviving members of the fire. At the same time, I want to take this opportunity to show my gratitude to all those who have contributed to supporting the residents, and also Ho, the fireman who was killed in the fire. You will always be our hero. The fire is cruel, but it shows the love among us. I thank President Xi Jinping for his concern for Hong Kongers, and also provincial governments for giving help to Hong Kong. Now, there is an old lady in Sichuan. She said that once we received help from Hong Kongers, now it's our turn to help them back. It greatly touched us. It shows how deeply connected we are. On behalf of the sports and culture sector, I can say that many of my constituents have contributed their time and efforts and money to help residents. They've provided counseling services, and also some free concerts have been held for residents. They've also helped transporting necessities to the residents. So I also want to give my thanks to my constituents. Other members in my party, G19, have contributed in their own arenas. For example, Mr. Ronnick Chan, he helped in terms of financial matters. Mr. Perry Yield helped arranging for shuttle buses and hotel accommodation. Mr. Yim Kong represented the Chinese enterprises, and so on. Now, the G19 will fully support the rebuilding work after the fire. Now, here I would like to briefly mention 3 points. I know the government has done a lot. At the present, temporary accommodation and support has been given to residents. But there are 3 concerns I have. First, the operation of the support fund for Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po. Now, $4.3 billion have been raised, and $1.3 billion are public money. So these are the hard-earned money from our citizens. We need to spend them carefully. Now, according to the statistics, including rent allowances for residents, some $1 billion have been set aside to help them. Now, in terms of the standard of offering subsidies and also the use of the fund, the government should report to the Legislative Council as soon as possible so that council members can chip in and put forward our views. The government should also carefully monitor the operation of the fund. It is necessary to invite the public accounts, the Commissioner of Public Accounts, to scrutinize the operation of the fund. Now, in the long run, we need to rehouse the residents. I'm pleased to see that the government has been gauging the views of affected residents and considered various options. Different affected residents have very different needs, so we should offer them diversified choice. I agree, though, that on-site rebuilding will entail a lot of hurdles, and the time needed will be very long. So I hope the government would communicate with residents regularly. Now, in terms of systemic reform and reviewing ordinances, for example, bid rigging, building, maintenance projects, and also fire services installations, these are deep-rooted issues. We need to tackle them. All members in G19 will fully support and cooperate with the government in taking forward this work. On behalf of all members in G19, I support the motion moved by the Chief Secretary of Administration. I so submit. Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, President. The government has given a quick response to the fire and helped affected residents to return to normality. Compared with the Great Fire in Los Angeles, Hong Kong has done a very good job. The Immigration Department has immediately reissued Hong Kong identity card to affected residents. I applaud the efforts. However, the needs of every resident is different. The time they needed for transitioning also varied. The government should set up a statistic database so that various departments can trace the progress and efficacy of various actions. On the other hand, there are a lot of information and discussion which take advantage of the disaster. We should condemn them. Now, also, there are various businesses exploiting citizens' compassion for residents. I support the government to help the residents, but it doesn't mean that we support the government to spend public money to compensate the residents. Now, on this premises, I hope the government would help provide long-term accommodation for residents and provide them with different options. That includes flag-for-flag exchange, providing them with a choice to buy HOS flags with priority. These are all viable options. In terms of the pricing and also the ratio of exchange, it shouldn't take too much time. However, on-site rebuilding is another matter. There are some who think that we can disregard all the regulations because this is an extraordinary circumstances. Now, Hong Kong is a city of rule of law. We need to sort out the ownership issues of the affected flags, and that's not an easy matter. It is nigh impossible to get the consent from all the property owners. If not, then the government will have to invoke the law to resume the remaining flags. Now, we can't justify non-compliance by saying that this is an extraordinary matter. We need to comply with the law. Maintenance reform and reform on property management involve very complicated issues. There has been a lot of discussion in council before. Now, having heard the officials' addresses, I'm pleased to see that the government is moving beyond their thinking, but rather they are now trying to find a right balance. Now, first, we need to enhance our efforts in tackling bid rigging, but we shouldn't mix up bid rigging and the fire. Otherwise, we will lose our focus in analyzing the issue. It is a very complicated matter, and we need to review, say, the competition ordinance and also the anti-corruption ordinance in relation to bid rigging and also the execution matter. Second, in phase with the mandatory building inspection scheme, we need to give more help to minority property owners. We need to strengthen penalty for non-compliance and supervise the relevant professionals to self-regulate. We should give more support to owners as well. However, the government should not intervene too much. Otherwise, the owners will feel that they are losing their autonomy. Overreach from the government will also jeopardize the professional autonomy of the industry. Now, I think the directions raised by the Development Secretary is right. Now, thirdly, it is a great cost on the residents. If we are adding more regulations, it will add to the financial burden of residents, and it will undermine the residents' ability to renovate the building. So on one hand, we should promote the use of information technology to reduce the information imbalance. And second, we need to control cost. I so submit I support the motion moved by the government.
Ms. Christine Fong. President, the Wang Fuk Court fire happened about 2 months ago. President, the Wang Fuk Court fire happened about 2 months ago. Government departments, different sectors, charities have provided support to affected residents to help them tide over the difficulties. I went to Kai Tak, the Tai Po Good House, and other community facilities with donors to find out more about the support arrangements. Many of the arrangements are only temporary, especially in relation to rehousing. Many affected residents want to start over as soon as possible. Many of them lived in Wang Fuk Court for over 10 years. They want to retain their existing communities when they are rehoused. Through the one social worker per household mechanism, the government has been collecting feedback and wishes of affected residents. Whichever option it is, I hope that options will be provided to households so that households can make different choices. I also suggest that government departments look into allowing affected residents to purchase home ownership scheme flats in the secondary market, as well as applying for public housing. There is close scrutiny after the fire on fire safety, building management, and estate maintenance for minority owners, perhaps even being elderly persons. As they're not professionals, they lack requisite knowledge with building maintenance works. They can easily be taken advantage of. We really need to combat bid rigging and unscrupulous individuals from taking advantage of them. I have 5 suggestions. In the short term, I suggest that there should be subsidiary legislation put in place for the ban of smoking in construction sites. Second, we should make use of smart tender more to help with building maintenance works. Through providing tender documents and assessments on works costs, we can provide a reference for citizens, and we can also promulgate more standards in relation to construction and fire safety materials. Regarding the costs and quotations of works, we can make use of AI, and we can have reference to the Architectural Services Department's guidelines and references so that the people of Hong Kong will be more aware of the general quotations of works and materials. I also suggest that the proxy instrument regime in the buildings ordinance building management ordinance be amended. We have had many disputes arising from proxy instruments. I think we should have third-party certification of the use of proxy instruments to help owners, corporations, and management committees to ensure the authenticity of proxy instruments. I did observe that Ms. Alice Mack talked about this point in her presentation. I hope that in future it will not only apply to owners, corporations, but also owners committees. In future, we should also provide for powers of the Competition Commission to increase penalties to enhance deterrence. We should in future have a building maintenance management authority that will share the work of the Development Bureau at the moment in relation to mandatory building and window inspection schemes and monitor building maintenance to provide technical support to rectify the existing building maintenance ecosystem. We should have the government take the lead and appoint a third party to have a assessment system for consultants and contractors and enhance transparency of backgrounds of tender submitting companies. I so submit speaking in support of the motion. Your time is up. Please stop. Dr. Johnny. The Wang Fuk Court fire has caused numerous casualties. The chief executive immediately set up 3 task forces and said we will get to the bottom of the cause of the fire to break through barriers of vested interests to hold those who are accountable so that those who died in the fire will rest in peace and everyone would feel safer. I think it really shows the determination of the government. We can see everyone working together to provide support to the affected residents. It is very touching. The most complex area will be long-term rehousing of citizens. It involves insurance, legal matters, and different residents have different opinions we shouldn't provide a single option. We should provide diversified options with reference to feedback collected from residents. The government has been trying to gauge the views of affected residents through the one social worker per household mechanism. I appreciate this. The government should, for different rehousing options, in situ redevelopment, flat for flat schemes, or otherwise, we should have detailed analyses provided to residents, telling them about the pros and cons and the data. We shouldn't take an across-the-board approach and provide only a single option to affected residents. We want to help the victims of a fire rebuild their lives as soon as possible, and it is very important to set down a long-term rehousing plan. However, we of course need to be prudent with public money, and we are the gatekeepers as LegCo members. I would say even if we reacquire the lot, it is not necessarily a waste of public money. I think as long as we make use of the resources efficiently, in the end, we will be improving people's lives. This fire also shows that there are issues with building safety, fire service installation management system, and other loopholes. We need to prevent similar occurrences. I very much support what is said in the motion, where the Council would fully support the government's disaster relief and rebuilding work that would include reviewing and updating legislation. We shouldn't be restricted by vested interests or complex procedures. We need to break through the barriers of vested interests and push forward systemic reforms so as to make Hong Kong a safe and livable city. We need to continue to enhance our firefighting equipment to enhance efficiency and effectiveness of firefighting. We need to procure equipment and systems. We need to allocate more resources to the Fire Services Department to acquire such equipment. To prevent similar major disasters from happening again and minimize the number of casualties in future, I suggest that the government enhance the emergency alarm system that was set up 5 years ago in 2020, and we need to make sure we have a systematic application to make sure we incorporate large-scale fires under the framework, so that when we have a number 3 or number 4 alarm fire, we will activate this EAS so that we will have telecommunications stations network support our dissemination of information. President, the grief of the fire will be an opportunity for us to take forward institutional reforms. And with the government motion, it's not just about rebuilding affected residents' lives, it's also about making use of reforms so that we won't have similar incidents happening again. We should work together to respond to the wishes of citizens to make it safe for our citizens to live here. Thank you. Mr. Lam Chun Sing, Deputy President. First of all, I want to express my recognition of the efforts of the government in dealing with the fire and providing support to affected residents. We have many owners in Wang Fuk Court, and it is difficult to obtain a consensus. I think we should adopt the following principles. We should respect the residents' wishes. 2, we should provide diversified options so that residents can choose with reference to their circumstances. Right now, we have some options available, including acquiring the affected residents' ownership in situ redevelopment, flat for flat arrangements, etc. There are pros and cons with different options. I think we shouldn't make a decision right away. We need to make sure we have comprehensive consideration and provide pragmatic choices for affected residents to choose from. We also realize something that does not cost a lot, such as scaffold nets, would also have loopholes for people to take advantage of to compress costs. Even the test certificates are falsified. The buildings department has already had some sort of standards for scaffold nets, so I guess some risks have already been identified, but there was not enough regulation. There was inadequate random inspections, checking, and laboratory tests, and unscrupulous individuals took advantage of that. The government should have a checklist and procedures for inspections for high-risk materials and the operations of construction companies. Unfortunately, some workers also died in the Wang Fuk Court fire. 3 years ago, the government increased the occupational safety and health offense penalties to a fine of $1 million. Has it been enough to deter them? For the contractors who are using falsified certificates, who are making use of cheaper materials instead of the higher materials they pledged for, this may not mean anything. The buildings department may have to make use of the buildings ordinance to revoke the licenses of these contractors. The government should improve cross-departmental communication. In fact, last year, the Ombudsman's report already talked about some flaws with the referral mechanism of contractors, but the buildings department did not really do much about this. We really need to deal with this issue. Building maintenance works are relatively high risk. Law enforcement agencies should have targeted operations and undertake more inspections. Departments should improve coordination in enforcement. For example, the buildings department and housing authority, when they have received complaints relating to maintenance works, they should have a referral mechanism in place to refer the complaint to specific departments. In future, we should have a cross-departmental working group to exchange intelligence and to have joint operations arranged. We need to rebuild not only homes after the fire, we need to instill confidence in people of building and maintenance safety. I believe the Legislative Council will fully support and work with the government to make reforms and build a safer community. I so submit speaking in support of the motion.
Mr. Wang Ka. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. The fire in Tai Po was traumatizing for everyone, but everyone pulled together. The government acted swiftly by setting up a support fund and then made this unprecedented move by putting in place the one social worker per household scheme, and then there was temporary housing for the fire victims. Our next step is to look at long-term housing, and that involves property titles and insurance payout. And then different residents have their own preferences. Last week, the government tried to gauge the preferences of residents. Options on the table included flat-for-flat schemes, acquisition of titles, resettlement within the district. When it comes to these options, we have to be compassionate, we have to show empathy, but we also have to stick to the fact. Let's start with in situ redevelopment. As Mr. Michael Wang, the Deputy Financial Secretary, said, redevelopment would take 9 to 10 years at the soonest. So common sense suggests that we first have to ascertain the property titles, and then we tear down the building, and then we rebuild. Legal proceedings or procedures are involved, and we cannot do a sloppy job with that, so it will take time. For fire victims, they want stable housing. Roughly 40% of the fire victims are aged over 60. They cannot be kept waiting. And let's also be mindful of the psychological needs of the fire victims. They are traumatized by the fire. The other rehousing options appear more practical. Let's look at replacement flats. It's faster. It's good if residents find HOS flats something they like, but we're not sure if those flats are coming on stream soon enough. And then there's also an issue of whether the people are willing to move to other districts. Replacement flats or acquiring property titles gives residents greater flexibility. Some residents expressed a reluctance to move to a different district, so we should be exploring resettlement within Tai Po. The BPA proposed using the site on Chung Nga Wo Rest. That site is spade ready. We proposed using that site to resettle the Wang Fuk Court residents. For this site, the building can be completed by 2029, and we can offer more than 1,000 units on the Chung Nga Wo Road West site. During the construction, assistance will continue, such as the annual rental assistance amounting to $150,000, and then we can let those 5 victims move into the new units on Chung Nga Road West. We have to be quick. For the 5 victims, faster rehousing means more certainty. Now, for the compensation, the Institute of Surveyors has given us some ballpark figures, how much things will cost. If we stick to in situ redevelopment, we also have to move quick. And we also have to explain things clearly. Social workers are there to help 5 victims, but social workers cannot be expected to be specialists in every area. So we should be explaining whatever proposal we decide to go with. And we also have to manage risks. Once we decide on a plan, we have to monitor every step along the way. The construction, the redevelopment, etc. We have to assess the risks beforehand and also from time to time. We should also deepen reforms. Let's enhance the role of the Competition Commission. The CC teamed up with law enforcement on crackdown operations in the past. So in the future, the CC should also play a role in monitoring the work. And we should also review the site safety protocol. We should engage professionals to provide advice, and then we improve the system. I support the motion. Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. The fire at Wang Fuk Court moved everyone in the community, and that includes everyone in the Legislative Council. As Mr. Gary Chen, the chairman of the DAB, said, we set up an emergency support center in Tai Po to help those residents. Some residents may want immediate rehousing, so we worked tirelessly in offering assistance. The government also proposed an independent committee. The government also promised to get to the bottom of things and hold the culprit accountable. On the post-disaster relief and recovery, we should recognize the government's effort. The 5 victims had to be rehoused in transitional housing or other forms of temporary housing. The government acted swiftly. Within 4 days, more than 1,505 victims had already been rehoused somewhere, transitional housing or hotels. I'm not talking about the queue, I'm talking about people already rehoused within 3 or 4 days. We should acknowledge the swiftness with which the government acted. On rehousing options, we welcome the several options already proposed to people. And today we have an opportunity to discuss these options. So we have options like flat for flat or acquisition of the titles for cash so that the 5 victims can buy other flats. And then another option is in situ redevelopment. The focus should be on speed. Any option that takes a long time will leave the residents distressed. Now for Wang Fuk Court, first we have to tear down the buildings, and then we rebuild. We can all see this. This is the slowest option. The government gave us a timeline of 10 years. So I have done some comparison. We can all remember what happened in Grenfell Tower in the UK in 2017. There was a blaze. It was only in February last year that all the issues were sorted, and then the demolition started. So the fire started in 2017, and then it took 8 years for demolition to start. Because in the UK, they went through the legal tussles. So demolition per se could take years. That is London. Of course, things are different here in Hong Kong. But I can see from this case study that demolition will take a while. Mr. Gary Chen also proposed the site on Chung Nga Road West. That's a faster option. Moving can happen as early as in 2029. So where speed is concerned, we should be considering this factor. Last week, I visited some 5 victims of Wang Fuk Court. They were staying in a transitional housing project in Kai Tak. Some 5 victims told me 10 years was too long. They would prefer to stay in Tai Po, but they would like a faster option. So time is of the essence. I support the government's motion. I so submit. Professor Chairman Kwong. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. First, I start by thanking the Chief Secretary for moving this motion so that the executive and the legislature could put their heads together and have a discussion about this and get their recovery efforts right. I'm from the Chinese medicine sector, so I want to talk about the relief and psychological support. The government acted swiftly after the fire by helping the victims, and then the government mobilized doctors, Chinese medicine practitioners, and dentists to offer free services. And then there were denture services and other medical services. Now, the mental health support helpline 18111 was also part of the effort. More manpower was deployed to offer support. I acknowledge this effort and I commend this. I do have some suggestions. First, I want to commend the work done by the Primary Healthcare Commission. We have district health centers across the city. The PHC coordinated primary healthcare services for 5 victims, but not every resident knows about those DHCs, so we should explain and tell people about the services. That way, those 5 victims can access appropriate health care and they know there is a service they can use. I support the waiver of medical expenses for foreign domestic helpers. But that waiver comes with a time limit. For ordinary victims, that support is enough. But let's not forget about victims who take longer to fully recover. Let's be flexible with these victims. Let's continue this medical fee waiver for these victims to show that we care about them. Now we have the Advisory Committee on Mental Health. That committee coordinates mental health support measures shortly after the fire. For fire victims in need, we should reach out to them. We should reach out to bereaved families. Let's not wait till they call us for help. Let's offer support to them to help them manage the grief. Housing is top of mind for people. I welcome the government's effort to gauge the views of Wang Fuk Court residents through social workers. Last month, our party, the DAB, also submitted a rehousing proposal to the government. So let's get the communication right so that those fire victims are fully informed about the pros and cons of different rehousing options. Whatever option those residents choose, we should strike a balance between respecting people's wishes and proper use of public resources so that our approach is informed by compassion, reason, and the law. We should support residents in rebuilding our homes so that they find stable housing and we can give them peace of mind. The fire took away many things and many lives, but we can show people our care. Many people stepped up to help right away. CM practitioners, doctors, other healthcare practitioners, and other members of the public rushed to the scene. Those people brought food or clothing for the winter. Everyone tried to help in whatever way they could. This kind of community-level solidarity is moving. We should look out for each other, and we will be able to help the residents of Wang Fuk Court go through this rough patch. Let's work together, and then we can overcome challenges, and we can build a safer Hong Kong. I so submit.
Mr. Stanley Ng. President, on behalf of the FTU, I speak in support of the motion moved by the government. The fire at Wang Fuk Court is a mega disaster in our history. We grieve the deceased firefighter and also the workers and also residents. We sincerely hope that the residents can return to normal life as soon as possible and that every soul is healed. Since the aftermath of the disaster, the government has been carrying out various follow-up work. An independent investigation committee has been set up, and task forces have been set up to provide comprehensive help to residents. In a short interim, 11 measures have been rolled out to help residents. The government has also harnessed the power of the community to show love to the residents. On the very day of the fire, FTU members have been helping the residents on site. On that night, our relief fund has donated $300,000 as an emergency relief for affected residents. The FTU also rolled out a fundraising campaign to raise funds for the residents. We have received great support from our members, including the Hong Kong Seafarers Association, the Construction Industry Federation, and also from other parties. And also the General Federation in Henan, Gansu, Macau, and so on. And also the Chinese Labor Relations Academy and also our chapters in Guangzhou and Shenzhen. They gave us a lot of support. We have raised some $15 million in donation. We've also set up a hotline manned with registered social workers to provide emotional support. Our centers have also provided emergency services for residents. We can lose no time in supporting the affected residents. Like everyone in Hong Kong, the FTU is concerned about the long-term accommodation arrangements for residents. Through telephone calls and also home visits, we have been showing concerns to the residents. Our contacts with the residents help us understand that the difficulties and circumstances faced by each family is different. So we support the government to take the perspective of compassion to spend public money reasonably. Now, we have met with the Secretary for Labour and Welfare and pass on the views we have collected to the government. We are pleased to see that the government has taken a very pragmatic and sincere stand in finding a viable solution. In terms of compassion, one, we need to respect individual views and provide diversified choices which meet residents' needs. Two, we need to act swiftly and finalize a plan for long-term accommodation so that affected homeowners can find a new home as soon as possible. The rehousing exercise will take several years. We suggest the government to suitably extend the duration of the rental relief to reassure the residents. Now, in terms of pragmatism, the FTU offers 5 suggestions. First, in terms of flags for flag exchange and also repurchase of premium unpaid flags and also white form HOS flags plan. In terms of cash repurchase and also elderly people flag for flag exchange, other FTU members will speak on the details of these suggestions. In terms of legality, the FTU urges the government to reform the laws to crack on the collusion between contractors and also the inherent loopholes in the system to protect the safety of property and lives. The FTU supports the government in every step of the way to better protect the safety and security of people to prevent disaster from happening again. Mr. Chong Ki-fong, President, I support the motion moved by the Chief Secretary for Administration regarding the support and rebuilding work after the fire. Some 160 people died and some 4,000 people have lost their home in the fire. I think we all agree that this is a grievous disaster which caused a lot of deaths. Now, we need to act swiftly. This is an extraordinary matter which should not be bound by a fixed mindset. And I support the government to take compassion first. Now, in terms of the viable long-term accommodation option, I thank the government for listening carefully to the views of the affected residents. I believe the actual needs and circumstances of each resident is different. Whether it is flag for flag exchange, buyback, or relocation within the same districts, I believe the government would balance all views and provide the best pragmatic and flexible options for residents and let them choose. There's one point, though. If flag for flag exchange is the final option, then whether it is in situ or within the same district or cross-district relocation, we need to follow the ordinary procedures. That is, priority for accommodation, but not the priority for flag selection. We need to sort out the property ownership issues and also the rebuilding issue for the affected blocks. Now, the government should take a careful stance, and also residents should consider the options carefully. The Sobody Support Fund has raised $4.3 billion. Some of it has been spent to offer financial support for residents. The key is how to maximize the remaining fund and also the long-term accommodation issue. Now, I think the government should give us a detailed budget to tell us how will the remaining fund be used and also how much more public money is required to support the residents. In terms of providing support to the residents and also balancing the interests of other citizens, there must be a balance. The government must maintain a high degree of transparency and consult the public to alleviate concerns. In terms of revisiting the existing laws, I support plugging the loopholes and revising the regimes. Execution is also a matter. We need to enhance enforcement. Buildings ordinance and fire services installation ordinance, we need to enforce them more. So, for example, the fire services installation ordinance, which was introduced in 2007. A few years ago, the government admitted that there are still 60% of fire services directions remaining to be followed up. So besides revising the law and stepping up inspection, we need to step up law enforcement as well. For non-compliant buildings and owners' corporations, we need to hand down punishment. We also need to help the remaining old buildings to speed up their work and prevent disaster from happening again. I'm pleased to hear that the government departments have sped up their work in this regard. In terms of independence committee, priority should be given to existing laws and loopholes so that the electrical can study these proposals. At the same time, insurance companies are waiting for the investigation results before they make a decision on insurance claims. Now, we should offer investigation results in batches so that insurance companies can address these issues as soon as possible. This will provide more timely support for residents. Now, I hope affected residents can return to normal life as soon as possible and that no such disaster will happen ever again. The government should also reform the system and take down vested interest barriers. As a new member of the electoral, I support the government in all works that is beneficial to the public. I so submit. Professor William Wong. Thank you, President. The number 5 alarm fire at Wang Fuk Court has caused 161 deaths and some 1,900 households to lose their home. The situation has caused concerns in the country and even the international world. I thank all the volunteers who contributed in helping the residents. I also thank the government for moving this motion in the first meeting of this term of the Council so that we can make proposals and suggestions on support work. The government should give priority to the most urgent concerns of the residents. Information and relief support should be given to residents as soon as possible. In this regard, we have to make use of INT technology. These are my suggestions. Now, in terms of a GTC support, that is support from the government to the residents, in the past few months, the government has issued various relief funds as well as the one social worker per household service plan for residents. The government now has a better idea on the information of the affected households. Now, these data should be collated and analyzed. An electronic support system should be set up to register the personal and familial information of the residents, as well as the bank account number of the households, so that future relief support can be dispersed more easily and also questionnaires can be given out more speedily in the future. Second, the government should make better use of AI. For example, use generative AI technology to answer affected residents' questions, help them complete forms and apply for various subsidies. The government can also use AI to speed up internal approval process. In terms of G2G level, government to government level, we need to strengthen data interchange between government departments. For example, the information and data of affected residents kept by various departments should be integrated so that when residents apply for public services and relief funds, departments can have access to information held by other departments. This will reduce the need of correspondences between departments and speed up cross-departmental collaboration. In terms of on the G to B level, government to business, in the long run, we need to make use of INT technology to enhance our project supervision system. For example, using Internet of Things, AI, and blockchain technologies to step up supervision and traceability of our construction materials. Now, just now, the Secretary for Development mentioned that the smart tender system would be enhanced. There would be a pre-approved list of contractors with better background checking. I fully support this move. We need to integrate and consolidate business data, for example, shareholding structure, and also the past record of bidding of the contractors. Now, with AI, we can analyze the data in different segments of the bidding process. With this, we can strengthen our oversight on the bidding process. And also, regulatory authority can speed up their approval process with more accuracy. President, the path to normality is still long. We need to continue to follow up with this matter. We understand that there are different views and wishes in terms of future accommodation. The government should find the common grounds as best as can and make the best use of technology to start the rebuilding work in the long run. This will show this time of the government's determination to address people's livelihood concern and plight. I so submit I support the motion.
Ms. Maggie Chan. Deputy President, I speak in support of the government motion. The Wang Fuk Court fire has caused a large number of casualties. It has given grief to a lot of households. The government has worked hard to support affected residents, and we have different sectors helping as well. The women's sector has made significant donations. For example, the Women's Federation of the country has made millions of dollars of donations, as well as the local women's associations. In December of last year, I wrote to the chief executive to support the setting up of an independent committee to hold those who should be made accountable. Right now, the government should formulate medium to long-term sustainable support policies. And we also need the government to put in place systemic reforms. For a long-term rehousing arrangement, the government should announce as soon as possible the different options, the timeline, and the specific details, and why some options are not provided. We need to make sure we make good use of the support fund and public money, and we should take a humanistic approach. Institute redevelopment will involve complex legal procedures. There has to be coordination of intentions of different owners. We also need to first deal with the issue of probate. Even for simple probate cases, it would take at least a year to process in Hong Kong, and without a will, it will take 2 to 3 years. Should there be disputes arising from inheritance or with the one who's supposed to inherit the estate is gone, it can take even longer. And if we look at the Grenfell Tower incident in London, we can see it will take much time to deal with the different complex legal issues. If we have to go with the option of in situ development, not only will it take long for the project to be completed and there is great uncertainty, owners will face great pressure as a result. In terms of laws, I suggest enhancing the declaration of interest requirements and increasing the penalties for false declarations. We should also enhance the Form 6B of the Building Management Ordinance. It is a declaration form to enhance declaration of interests by owners, corporation, and management committee, as well as property management committee staff members. We also need to have higher penalties for false declarations or false information provided. Right now, the penalty level is at 6 months imprisonment. It's too low. We also need to enhance the code of practice for procurement of supplies, goods, and services. We need to make sure when we have some false facts being used as evidence in civil or criminal cases, we need to have harsher penalties. We also need to expand the scope of the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance. We need to look into amending Section 2 of the Ordinance so that we need to cover Owners Corporation, Management Committee, Owners Committee members, as well as property management staff members, so that we will be criminalizing and regulating bid rigging in specific laws. I also urge for the government to make things more transparent, to publish the tender as well as registration arrangements. We should also be regulating and preventing domination of consultants. I so submit speaking in support of the motion. Mr. Chris Ip. Deputy President, I speak in support of the motion proposed by the Chief Secretary. Last November, we had the Wang Fuk Court fire. It has caused a great number of casualties. It's not just a tragedy of the residents of Wang Fuk Court. It also brings grief to the people of Hong Kong. Very fortunately, we have the support of Presidency, the Central People's Government, as well as different sectors. We have provided support for affected residents, especially with the one social worker per household mechanism. Now we have to move on from emergency response to the healing of wounds and rebuilding people's lives. With rehousing, we need to balance practical factors and compassionate factors. We have to provide diversified options. Right now, the government is conducting a survey on the long-term rehousing options. We do have an option of in situ redevelopment, but we have to look at the practical factors. It will take at least 10 years for residents to be rehoused if we go with the option of in situ redevelopment, especially for elderly residents. This is a very costly option. For the Tai Po Chung Ah Road West rehousing proposal, we can have population intake at approximately 2029. We can halve the waiting time, but the government should not take an across-the-board approach. It must provide diversified options. For those who want to be rehoused as soon as possible, we should provide cross-district housing units for affected residents. For those who want to stay in Tai Po, we should also provide suitable option. For those who want to just have their ownership acquired and move elsewhere, we should also provide the relevant option. Deputy President, the Wang Fuk Court fire is a tragedy, and preliminary investigation has shown that we have been using scaffold nets that are not up to par, and we have put in place foam boards, which is flammable, and it has caused the rapid spread of the fire. It's not just a disaster, it seems. The Wang Fuk Court fire shows that there are barriers of vested interests. We have owners, corporations as volunteers managing significant sums, but they lack the professional knowledge of works projects, so they have unlimited powers and just limited responsibilities. The URA has the smart tender arrangement, but advisory support alone is not enough to protect minority owners or small owners. We really need to have greater participation of the government. We should perhaps have a statutory body intervene to handle matters on behalf of owners' corporations so that owners who lack the professional knowledge needed will have the assistance they need. We also need to enhance transparency of tendering by owners' corporations. The government should shift from a non-interventionist approach to become a setter of fair rules and a gatekeeper. I also support the setting up of an independent committee to find out about the truth. Mr. Justice David Locke was engaged to lead the investigation of the independent committee that has ensured efficiency, and it will ensure proper investigative powers are provided. We need to make sure we learn from the experience to prevent similar tragedies from happening again. With the reconstruction of Wang Fuk Court, it's not just about the reconstruction of buildings, it's about reconstructing confidence of the people and reforming the building management system that is plagued with issues. I so submit speaking in support of the motion. Mr. Rob Chen. Deputy President, first of all, I would